Hello, everyone.
Seems good. Let me just make sure chat hears us.
Yeah, I hear it on my side.
All right. Um,
Okay,
guess
just
I'm
tweeting.
ready.
We are live.
Yep, I guess we're ready to get started then. What else are you up to this evening?
Yeah.
You just got home from school.
Um, I just had a class to attend. And now I'm doing this before the Fantasy Star 2 New Genesis beta. So we're gonna do that, and then I'll probably go get lost in that for a little while. But this is a sufficiently important topic to take me away from that.
Yeah, I thought it would be good to have just a quick discussion on it because this is something I'm always thinking about, and I definitely see the issue is coming to a head in several areas of the FGC. So I guess, assuming
Yeah,
we're
I mean,
ready to
there's
get
been a
into
lot of
it,
little things.
yeah, maybe you can
Uh,
introduce like what started all this to everyone.
um, okay. So why are we here today? We're here today because of the tweet that you guys can see on your stream, where I brought up that as of next month, June 1st, we're going to have um, a rule, a new policy by Google Drive, where if you're inactive after 2 years in any of their products, right, and emphasis on products, we'll get into the devil in the details in a minute there the any of the products, if you're inactive for 2 years, they will start deleting your content on it, right? And by content, I mean just files and contacts and whatever. And what I mean by products is that you can be active on Gmail, for example, but maybe you have something that other people read on Drive. And if you're not active in Drive, they will delete it, despite the fact that you're active in Gmail. So you have to always be interacting with the different services that they offer. And this is going to lead to a lot of things being deleted straight up. Like a lot of things that other people use are going to be gone. There's a lot of reasons why somebody would not be able to meet this criteria. And a lot of the people that kind of responded to that tweet were like, "Oh, certainly you log into Google once every 2 years, right? That can't be that hard, right?" But there are a lot of people who don't have their accounts anymore, or are deceased, or and nobody knows that, so you can't really do anything about it, or um, or they just don't care, and they ignore it. Maybe they switch to a different service. It's hard. It's hard to imagine that Google, doesn't control everybody right now in terms of services, but somebody could just may as well not log in, and they just completely miss it. And there it goes, right?
Yeah,
Um.
this is a bit abstract still because maybe people don't fully understand what this means. So, on the one
Oh no,
hand,
yeah,
to be
yeah, for
inactive,
sure.
is there a guideline for what counts as inactive right now? Did they say 2 years?
Um, they said 2 years, and they said that they will begin sending notifications. I assume emails is what they mean by that,
Hmm.
or notification to your phone because Google can do that. Um, that I assume that's what they mean. But yeah, people are not gonna really notice this until something is lost. That's just what's gonna happen. That's the trend of everything related to preservation. People are not gonna notice until something's just gone.
Yeah,
And
and also just, I guess also to make it more concrete. So we're talking Google Docs. These are anything from spreadsheets, scheduling documents,
yeah, so
old
there
tournament
are a couple
write-ups.
of
Go
there
ahead.
are a couple of exceptions
Okay.
that are worth pointing out. So you'll see there on the tweet, I think it's still there. It says docs, sheets, slides,
Hmm.
forms, sites, files. Um, the couple of exceptions, I think sites themselves, like Google sites, like the actual pages, I think are still there, but I think they can delete the attachments because you can like upload
Yeah.
stuff to them. I think that's like the one big exception. So let me put all this into context because now we need to talk about, okay, this is great because you'll notice in the tweet that I say fighting games, but the
Hmm.
entire discussion up until now has not been about fighting games because this has sweeping implications for everybody. But I need people in fighting games to listen, and here's why, right? You have starting around like Ultra Street Fighter 4, this like that era of fighting games. You have this thing where people start moving to like social media as the primary means of communication. Like people start moving away from forums. SRK was still there, but they were starting to shut down a couple of years after that era. And the same thing happened with anime games, with the original Mizumi. The IRC stuff started going away. Melty Bread is still active, but was not used as much anymore. And you started seeing people switch to like chat room programs.
Mm-hmm.
And
maybe
sooner or later,
really maybe we could put a year on this then, because like we all know about Dustloop. I guess Skullheart started as a developer forum, and then I know for Smash everything was getting onto Facebook and Facebook events, probably around 2014 onward. So is that where this transition started from old media to new media?
I want to say around 2015, 2014, probably.
Okay.
Because that was, I would have to go and do the research, but to me, that's like, when you look at the reason I say this is because when you look at like resources that exist for games that like pre Street Fighter 4 and post Street Fighter 4, Ultra Street Fighter 4 specifically, you start to notice that it's no longer like forum posts. It's like Google Sheets and like videos and stuff. You start to notice that trend, because at that point, like I said, people started moving away from centralized like dedicated websites for enthusiasts, and they started working on social media, and people just started going ham on putting all the information there for whatever reason. So now there's a generation or two of information for fighting games that came out after that, and also fighting games that were rediscovered after that, where there's Google spreadsheets and presentations and write-ups, and this includes all kinds of stuff. I'm talking frame data, matchup advice, just character guides in general. All this stuff is now on Google somewhere, right? Somewhere on Google or Discord, or a combination of both. I've seen like documents that you can only find through a Discord, and I've also seen entire write-ups in Discord channels. Like, it's insane to me. But that's what I've seen.
So I would say too, it's either pinned stuff in Discord, or I don't know. I guess, why do you think they're moving to closed channels? Is it just the ease of use, whereas setting up a forum is
to become the ease of use, right? Because people's first eyeballs on these communities has somehow ends up being Facebook groups or Discord channels, because that's the word of mouth, right? That people tell you to join the Discord or join the Facebook group or something like that. So people start getting incentivized through attention, I guess. I don't know, to have this stuff on there, even though you could just as easily send someone a link to a web page.
Maybe it is dedicated. I guess because we're going to talk about wikis later. Maybe it is just ease of use of the format. People are less familiar with wikis. They're less user-friendly, not as hip. So maybe we have to just have new UX, and that will change things. But I definitely see the trends. I agree with you.
Yeah, there is that aspect, right? But so just to kind of bring it all around, now we have years and years and years of information that could potentially be deleted for any of the reasons that I talked about at the beginning, right? Things could be deleted because the person doesn't maintain their account, or they passed away, or they forgot the account details, or whatever. And now, and also just lack of interest, right? Like, somebody could have that document, but other people may not know about it. And so nobody can go in and really transcribe the information, or maybe they won't because they feel they don't have the permission to. That's something I've had a lot of problems with, where I'll see a document and it's useful, but the creator doesn't want anyone copying it, so it's sitting in a Google Doc somewhere, and we also have to respect that. Otherwise, they're gonna, complain about us, and we don't want that.
And they could just delete it to free up space, not thinking about it. Like, accidents happen too. Anything could happen to history.
Anything could happen. And so this is all about Google. And the reason it's about Google is because that's just where people went, right? Like, there was somebody who replied in there saying that they use OneDrive to make backups and that they do it for local backups. And I'm like, that's cool. I'm glad that they do local backups, but like, maybe someday I'll get into the whole thing about like, what do you do? What's Microsoft's policy on preservation? What's Dropbox's policy on preservation? These services that offer, data storage almost out of thin air. It's like, do they care about preservation, or do they just care about having your engagement?
Well, I can
And
answer that a bit, and the answer is definitely no. Like Google's doing this because they are freeing up space and they're starting to charge for their
oh
storage
yeah,
plans. And I had Jason Scott on a few weeks ago, and he does a lot of work in preservation, especially for games and archiving. So he would be one to tell you that one, we're losing a lot of history in Discord just because it's the silo nature, and two,
yep,
everything you do is living and breathing, and it's temporary. People just have to have a
yeah,
different mentality about how you write and interact with mediums.
yeah. And you mentioned information silo, and somebody asked me when I like shared the tweet that I made about the stream. Somebody asked me what's an information silo, so I'll just answer the question.
Yeah.
It's like if you need a hard example, think about Google Drive, but it's really just these services that exist to kind of like get all of your important information and put it in their ecosystem, and now it's all there, and now you pay them for it.
But
You know what I
we
mean?
could contrast it to open source maybe if you understand that. Like a Wikipedia is open source. The code is free for everyone. The information can be downloaded, backed up, manipulated. Everything's open. Whereas a silo would be
Yeah,
like Facebook or Discord, where this is a server, closed access to it. You need permissions to get in, and once you're in, there's limits on if you can export, transfer in between.
exactly, right? So you might think, and I use the Drive example, but it's like the lock-in that they provide with the service is going to impact a lot of preservation. And I'll give you a real world example. The reason that it's hard to copy, even though you might think it's just, a document, you just copy and paste, is because the way that the the internet is built now as like apps stuff like
Web apps, you're saying?
like Google Sheets and Google's
Okay.
like Docs, like they're like applications, not web pages. Like they have, all these useful tools and menus and stuff like that.
It's
But
a
the problem is
service,
that
yeah.
on top of that, they have the ability to lock what you can take from it. So here's the example. A couple of months ago, we had a problem. Somebody went into a Discord chat that I'm in and asked, what happened to the big list of all the fighting game Discords? And I said, I have no idea. So I looked at it. I went to the link that's usually there, and it was gone. It was not there. It said the file was deleted. It said specifically that the file was in the user's trash can or something like that.
Hmm.
So I asked, and I'm not going to name him because he doesn't like people
Yeah, it
talking
doesn't
about
really
it.
matter.
I asked him, hey, what happened? Can you, is there a mistake here? And he said, no, I just don't want people using it. So, whatever you think about that, take that for what you will. That is what he said. There was a screenshot somewhere of it. He said, I just don't want people to use this anymore.
And that's
I
not
was
a
like,
bad
okay.
thing because you could have many reasons. You could be researching for like a business and not want all your research to be in a competitor's hands where someone could just take that
Yeah, I think
information.
the reasoning that they explained was just that they felt that the work was just being used without, like, it was
With,
thankless, like they just
okay.
weren't being rewarded for that. And I mean,
It wasn't
okay,
intended to be
I
open,
understand.
but it was treated that
Yeah,
way.
I understand. I understand why you think that, but we asked, can you give me a copy? And the initial answer was no. So what we had to do was somebody had an Internet Archive link
Hmm.
of it, and now here's the kicker: because of the way Google Sheets works, that archive link, and you would think it would have worked fine, didn't.
Yeah,
We were
it's much
only
harder.
able to recover like 30 or 40 links out of the hundreds that were in there. Because the way it works is that it's Google Sheets, the web page that you use, only loads information that's on the screen. It
Yeah.
hides the rest. So that makes it impossible to really grab all of the contents. That is the danger of these services, right? That even if somebody just goes and like mass pulls and I've thought about this, like what if somebody just mass pulls every doc that they can find in like every Discord or whatever, then they may not necessarily be preserved in a useful way because of that limitation. Because you have a setting in Google to prevent people from copying this stuff, and that's what gave us so much trouble. Now, thankfully, they gave it to me later, and we actually did transplant all of the contents to the Shoryuken wiki. I made a new page with all the links, and that way, if you want a link, you can actually just copy it, and you could just and I've actually made sure that if any page on the wiki you want to pull it to Internet Archive, it'll work. It'll work 100%, and it'll be readable, and it'll stay there.
So
So
real
that
quick, are you using Google services still for that, or are you using a different service now?
what I did is kind of like I got a copy. I put it on my drive because the way like it was displayed previously was Google Sheets has like the ability to publish it as like a web page or something like
Yeah.
that. So I put it there under my account and I closed it and I added a big notice. We're no longer updating this list. Go to this web page if you want to add more.
So it's a
Or
website
whatever.
now.
It's like a link to my drive that I'm not maintaining. Obviously, I don't want things to be lost. So if Google ever says anything to me, I'm gonna try to do something about it. But uh, the point is that now all of those links are on wiki pages and they can be copied and they can be preserved. So there's no need for that sheet. I just have it there in case we miss something, because I'm pretty sure we went through and added all of them, but maybe we missed it. So I just kept it there.
So yeah, there's a few dangers we're talking about. One is solid information, which is when you move things from forums that are more open, even if they're unstructured or harder to read. If you go into Facebook groups and Discord, that information is effectively lost. It's hard to archive. You're not going to get it reliably. So just the act of using those things makes it harder to preserve the history. The other thing now,
it's extremely hard.
and then the other thing is these live services. So using something like Google Sheets or Documents, you just can't rely on it forever because everything is temporary. Servers have to get run, and if the server's not there, it's not going to exist. So I don't know. The greater question is, what do you do in the long term? Because moving it to your own infrastructure is good for a little bit, but we're talking 50, 100 years, and you want to preserve history. What are we going to do? And that's where wikis come in, I guess.
So here's the thing, right? Like, you could say, oh, everyone's gonna move on. People are gonna, other people are gonna have to come along. That's fine. That's an accepted risk of the things that we have to do. That's the real world. The real world is that people are not going to be invested forever. What you need to make sure about is that when that happens, somebody else can step in, right?
Yeah.
And that is a danger with some of the services that we rely on, because we have I've already got into it. There's problems where there's services that you just can't copy from, or that it'll become impossible to find some of these things because of the way that they're shared. You're not going to find a Discord link or a Facebook group or whatever. These things are very hard to find if they're not already shared around. So if people stop sharing them, it just becomes difficult to track. But the real question is, if somebody decides to stop maintaining a service tomorrow, how hard is it for somebody to copy all of that information? With wikis, which is where I'm most invested, the answer is it's extremely easy. Not only is it extremely easy because you can just copy and paste, or you can go to Internet Archive and you can hit archive and it'll be there. The other part is that the MediaWiki, at least, not every wiki software has this, has the direct ability to export a page. So there's like a special page where you plug in the name of the page and it generates for you a readable version of it for you to read offline.
Mm-hmm.
That is important, right? Because as long as the wiki service is alive, if you want to take a piece of it and have it with you, you're allowed to do that. Not only are you encouraged to do that, the way the software works is that you're able to take a copy of it and use it yourself. And we've talked about internally with the wikis that I run, we've talked about ways to expand on that. Like, what if there was a particularly really well done sort of category or write up about a game? Like, what if we created a very nice curated, almost like a book of it, and then you can you can print that as a book if you want, or you can have it as a digital PDF, so you could put that PDF on Internet Archive or whatever. I've thought about stuff like that. Obviously, that doesn't cover everything, but the point of that is to cover the best stuff, basically. But that's kind of more a case-by-case basis sort of approach. But yeah, I mean, we do need to think about making sure that if we're running a public resource, is somebody going to have the ability to take all of this and do it themselves later on?
So the problem still remains, how do you encourage people to use wikis more often? Or I guess forums are pretty much dead, but people are not going to
Yeah.
move off Discord anytime soon. We have to hope that
Uh,
they're not just putting the information there. They're going to go and put it on a wiki and reference that page at least. I don't know. What
yeah.
can we do about that?
So I've semi-successfully, I would say, because there's still some things that I'm still trying to get worked out. I've tried to get a couple of games to really have their information on Wiki, and you gotta for the for some parts of it you have to sell them on. Other parts, there's benefits that Google Drives and stuff just can't give you, just because it's not the nature of the service.
Mhm.
So one is that people really like well done wikis, right? They really like it when a website has well organized information, and people will tell everyone around it. Like Skullgirls has solved this. They have an excellent set of information. Everyone likes to read it, and as a result, people tell everyone else about it. And the
Mhm.
same goes for Dustloop for pretty much everything. So
And this is a
that
part of
that
big
becomes a
games
useful
too.
way
Like
to get people into it.
yeah, and you see big companies like Blizzard putting a ton of money into maintaining wikis and like information about their own games and
Oh
characters.
yeah, and I mean I haven't even said it at all, but this is not a problem that most gaming genres have.
Yeah, this is very unique to
Like
us because it is a good marketing tool too, I guess, to present your information in a good way.
yeah, so like a couple things about that. First, almost every game that sells millions of copies in any other genre has a well done wiki. Like think about like Terraria. Think about I don't know, whatever. Name the game. If people play it, there's a really well done wiki. And for some reason for fighting games that's not the case. I don't
Well,
know why,
maybe
but
we could
that is what it
dissect
is.
why. Do you think it's just the way the culture started in the arcades and like how low tech we were until forums came around? I'm not even sure.
I mean, I think part of it. Okay, I do have an answer. Part of it is because the people who were involved with these websites, because we did have all these things. We did have a well-run Ricky. We did have that. The problem is that the people running that stuff did not think about anything that we're talking about here.
Or they
They
just didn't know back
they
then. It
did.
was the early
Yeah,
internet.
maybe because
Yeah.
it was early internet. Maybe they didn't think about this stuff, and that's not necessarily their fault. Because as you
Yeah.
said, the discourse around this was much different, and even games companies have said that they didn't think about preservation in the early 90s, even early 2000s, because nobody thought this stuff was going anywhere, so they didn't care. And now we have say like cases of games where the source code is lost because
Yeah.
of that mentality, but it is what it is, right? So let's talk a little bit about that timeline real quick. Again, Ultra Street Fighter 4. Shoryuken forums are ending up so expensive to run that the Cannon brothers don't want anything to do with it. So they almost close it down. I don't know. I was not there for this. I don't know what caused them to move it to the new forum software that they ended up using. I don't know. At the same time, the Shoryuken wiki was falling into disrepair because the people who wrote it originally didn't really do much in the way of encouraging other people to contribute.
Mm-hmm.
To my understanding, most of that original Shoryuken wiki, and I mean when I say original, I mean old Marvel vs. Capcom 3 and a couple of Street Fighter games, but it was not Street Fighter 4. The Street Fighter 4 stuff got done by somebody else later. They kind of didn't really think too much about wikis as like an important thing. They just MediaWiki appears to have been what they ended up using, but it wasn't necessarily their intention to create that. It just ended up being an open access wiki over time because that's just what made sense. And I say that because when I look at like all the really old pages and some of the files when I did the renovation of that website, I noticed this. I noticed that a lot of the decisions that they made were not necessarily intended for other people to edit later. So
it was seen as a private resource still, even though it was a wiki.
Yeah, even though it was a wiki, it just seemed like that's just what they ended up, choosing to use. So whatever. And then apparently, and I can only say this because I looked at like kind of the server that the Shoryuken wiki was originally hosted on. It seems as though in about 2011, somewhere from 2011 to 2014, it seems like maybe once in 2011 and then again in 2014, somebody tried, I don't know who, Somebody tried to upgrade it and they had problems. So because of that, the wiki was just like, it just looked archaic. It had none of the useful things that wikis were starting to adopt around that time. So people stopped using it. You know, Mizumi was doing well at that time because Undernight was coming out, and that grabbed a lot of people's attention, and so that was a really big title for the wiki. And Skullgirls had moved there because the situation at Shoryuken was just becoming unsustainable. And now that caused a lot of people to leave. Right? There's tons of people who just dropped out of the ecosystem of creating stuff, and they just created their own Google Docs, and they just created their own Discords and stuff, because that stuff was just a pain in the butt to deal with previously. You know, nobody was maintaining any of that stuff, and people were starting to say that some of these things were dying, and some of them did die. So now, what we have to do is create that culture again with the services that we now have.
That's actually an interesting point. It's all of these wikis sprouted up around existing forums and communities. They started that way. Now it's reversed, where we're trying to attract people, I don't want to say back to an old medium, but something more reliable, because the current services are just not offering it in terms of archiving and history.
Yeah. So we've had some successes, like the Soul Calibur 6 wiki right now at Shoryuken is being worked on, and we've got quite a few editors, and they're doing an awesome job. And the reason that they're able to do such an awesome job is because Shoryuken is now taking advantage of everything that comes out from MediaWiki. I've always stayed with the latest stable release, and I try to take advantage of every little thing that we can get. We were able to start tapping into databases from other people. So in this particular example, we have Frame Caliber, which is an open source data sheet. It's literally just a giant spreadsheet of all the frame data in Soul Calibur 6. And before you ask, it is a Google sheet.
Okay, I was just curious.
But you can download it, and I trust, you do have to have some level of trust. But Unicorn is the guy who runs that, and he doing an awesome job. And he gave me access. Anyone can add it, but he helped me understand how to do this so that we were able to take advantage of that database on the wiki. So to make it real short, the way it works is that we have all the frame data on all the pages of each character for Soul Calibur 6. All the editors need to do is, through a very simple set of formatting, they can pull that information from the database and they can write about it. So they can say, okay, this is a good move for, Aswell. So Aswell, and there's like a little move ID for every move. And so Aswell's move number 94 or whatever. This is really useful in neutral or whatever, and they just write the description. And so it becomes very effortless for them to start writing extensive pages about the characters. And this is good because the Soul Calibur community has talked a lot about how to get new players into the game. And what always ends up happening every time somebody has this conversation of fighting games is that the resources need to be better. Mm-hmm. People always say that. It's like,
you need YouTube guides. You need flashy videos. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. You need to start attracting people. So wikis always end up in that conversation somewhere. James Chen on Twitter brought this up. I can't quote him because I don't remember exactly what it was, but he said something interesting. He said, he goes. Okay, it was something like he's worried that people go into Discords and have nobody to play. And so they're wondering, why the genre is dying, quote unquote, right? And it's like, the first problem is that how do people find out about that Discord? How do people find out about any of this stuff?
Mm-hmm. They have to. They start with a search, or you
have to know exactly. The current medium for like a bunch of these games is you just have to know. Somebody has to tell you. You just got to be in the know that this exists and that's out there, or the smart thing to do is to take advantage of the search bar, right? The first time anyone wants to know something about any sort of information in 2021, what people do is they go to google.com and they search for something, right? So they want to know, how to play Street Fighter V, and I'll give you an example of Street Fighter V. So I did a test for a blog post that I did. I went to Google. I tried to make myself as anonymous as possible so that my search results wouldn't be biased. And I typed in Street Fighter 5 Ryu guide. Like, what would come up? What's the first thing?
I'm guessing YouTube.
Yeah, YouTube.
Yeah.
The answer was almost every time I tried that, and even for other games, even for games with really good wikis, the answer was YouTube. They prioritize YouTube like so much. There's always a YouTube result at the top if they can give you one. So you start having this problem where these YouTube videos are extremely outdated. In the example I just gave Ryu, the first result was Capcom Fighters, their official guides. The problem with that is that video was made when Street Fighter V came out.
Yeah, things have changed.
Things have changed a lot. That video doesn't mention anything about a second V-trigger at all because they added that later. So you have this entire gameplay mechanic just missing. And obviously, V-Shift just came out recently. They added a new mechanic, and all the stuff in that video has changed in some way or another in subtle but meaningful ways that you should probably know about. So it just becomes like the most surface level example that is just completely useless to most people. That they don't need to know, 99% of that information because it's either changed or you can only take so much away from it. So that part of the problem there is that Street Fighter V's wiki is not well known. I've done stuff to change it, but basically, if you look up wiki for Street Fighter V, you almost never get a hit, or at least that was the case. You just get like random search results on the internet because Google doesn't know what to put there. And when we worked on renovating the Street Fighter V wiki, now the Street Fighter V wiki is in a much different place. It has full frame data for Season 5 because we worked with Full Meter, which is kind of like the Street Fighter equivalent of Frame Caliber. They also have an open data set. So we revamped all the pages. We gave it a new format. We plugged in the database for Full Meter so that we have all that. And now, if you look up Street Fighter V wiki or Street Fighter V frame data, we come up in the search results. And that has resulted in, I want to say, at least tens of thousands of visitors, like just server visits to those pages per day. Maybe not per day, per week. We'll put it per week. I haven't looked at the statistics in a while, but I saw thousands and thousands of hits to these pages that I was working on. And this stuff is meaningful. I started noticing in just random Discords screenshots of that wiki, and I'd never spoken to that person. I never said anything. I don't know who they were. I started seeing people talking in base of the resources that we wrote there. Just because it was there on the internet, just because somebody can find it. That stuff has meaning. But that's not an easy thing for most people to do, I guess. It did require a fair bit of like technical knowledge to get me there.
I was also going to ask, do you think it's community dependent? Like some communities just are more technical or more inclined to be rigorous with how they do this, whereas some communities just do it by feel, maybe? That's kind of an oversimplification, but maybe some things don't.
There's the possibility, right? Like, there's a possibility that if somebody starts, because one of the interesting things about fighting games is that the advent of like Fightgate and Null DC Bear and stuff like that is that almost anybody can pick up these games that just like nobody played when they came out and give them, a little bit of a community. They can start a Discord server, they can post some clips online, they can get people to play them, And so that has led to situations where like games that literally did not even come out, like people find them later on arcade boards. They've essentially come out in 2021.
Yeah.
Like they come out just because like, preservationists just went and found it somewhere and they put it on the internet because they want it to survive, and other people start playing this game. And that I can think of at least 2 examples of this. But yeah, the point being that it's very easy now to, start a community around a fighting game that very few people played. So you do maybe end up in a situation where, the people who are doing that are not, accustomed to these things, or they're not familiar, or it's just not what they're interested in doing, right? That's possible. I think the real problem isn't that, though. That is whatever to me. The real problem is Street Fighter V. The real problem to me is that these games that are played by like thousands of people every day. Tekken, Soul Calibur, Street Fighter, all this stuff. Thousands of people every day, and it's the hardest thing to understand how to play those games sometimes. And I'm gonna quote James Chen again because he keeps bringing up stuff that I agree with. He said that Street Fighter V is a game that you have to have a lot of knowledge for, and I agree with that. When I look at all the random stuff, when I don't even play that much Street Fighter V, but when I go through maintaining the wiki, I just look at all these random things that are like important to know. You got to know this stuff, and the game doesn't tell you. You just have to know that this works a certain way, and this frame data is super important because you can do this setup and it becomes plus, or you can tick throw this situation.
Well,
Like,
so let me ask you,
know.
do you think this is developers not explaining the game well, either through tutorials or just like knowledge, or you think they should be more explicit in how they're doing it? Maybe they chose to be a bit obtuse there because it's Street Fighter.
There's two ways. There's two approaches to this. First, I'm gonna address Tarkus in the chat, very handsome lad who asked me what an information silo is. The other day, he asked me what I think about if wikis received review copies of games. Like, what if we were able to receive review code and we could have on day one, like, all the character frame data, for example?
That would be ideal, yeah. Get the developer
that
to
would
work
be
with
ideal.
you.
That would be. But let's talk about why I don't necessarily agree with that. The problem is that I do want the developers to have the stuff in the game. I do want there to be like frame advantage indicators, and I want there to be detailed explanations, and I want that stuff. So I think the problem is that if you start doing that, I think some developers would see that as like a crutch, and they would have very bad experiences for new players in their games. Because they'll be like, oh, just read the wiki. We give them the copy of the game.
You're talking specifically about like tutorial onboarding, like
yeah, exactly, yeah. Like getting players into the game. Because I don't necessarily want to do that when I'm trying a game. It's nice, but maybe I don't want to interact with that stuff. And you still want somebody who doesn't want to interact with that stuff to have the full picture of the game.
I think that's what they're afraid of, that if they put too much info in there, it's going to either be an annoying format to read or just be too obtuse for a new user. We are trying to see them get more user friendly. That is a trend.
Yeah, and I think that's fine, but I think like I'm not paying $60 so that you can just like lie to me about how the game works.
They're not lying. That's a bit much, I think.
Or just like not telling me how something works. I do think you have to have you have to make an effort. And that's kind of the thing. It feels like they're just saying, oh, we don't need to make an effort about this stuff because, they don't need to know that.
It's like, interesting because
they do need to know this stuff. It is important. This genre is very hard, to parse sometimes. So we do need to try.
And when you think about fighting games, they're always so obtuse because they started in arcades, and you're either trying to get word of mouth going because there's a secret character and some crazy input if you beat this guy a certain way. So none of this stuff was ever given away. They want you to find it for yourself. Maybe that's something that now has to change, or it has to be adapted for the new era.
I think you can have discoverability without sacrificing information, right? The thing is that what you're saying is, they want people to discover setups and, technical stuff, and that's fine. But like Guilty Gear Strive trying to hide the risk meter, that's not that. That's not what that was. That was just complete ridiculous. I haven't
played Strive yet.
Okay, so if you don't know, in the original beta builds, like original builds of the game that they showed off, you can just look it up, because they still have videos on their YouTube channel of this.
Mm-hmm.
They have the risk meter, this super important thing that determines like how badly you're going to get counter hit in a game where counter hits matter more than ever. They kind of put it in like a little corner next to your character icon, and it's like 3 pixels wide. I'm not kidding. Somebody counted.
So is the idea that they think it's not useful, or that it's distracting?
They think you don't need to know about this stuff. That you don't. It's just not. New players, don't worry about it. You don't have to worry about it to play the game. It's like, no, you do have to worry about it. You have to worry about it a lot. And so when people started giving them feedback, one of the first things they changed was they made the risk meter bigger. It's still not very big. It's kind of a bad thing, but they implemented that feedback. So I think there's Tarkus in the chat saying that their stated stance is that they don't want people to feel the need to study mechanics and frame data and combos. Well, I'm very sorry, Arc System Works. The entire game is mechanics and frame data and combos. There's literally nothing else except for like Habbo Hotel now because you decided to do that. That lobby system is atrocious. But the thing that I want to see is if you feel that it would be convenient for you to have, you know, a well done wiki by like providing the users with like an info dump or giving somebody a review copy, that's fine. It just doesn't solve any of the problems for me. You know, it's just it's a nice thing, but we've been getting by without that stuff for a long time. And one of the other possibilities is that the information that they give you is wrong. And I'll give you a real world example of this. Capcom on Shadaloo CRI, which is like their website where specifically for like game data, they actually publish full frame data for all the characters. I don't know if everyone knows this. What's the problem? It's sometimes wrong.
Yeah.
Because we have, thankfully, very smart people at Full Meter who have created like decompilers for the game scripts. And so we find out about stuff just because they see an inconsistency with what they're provided versus what the game works like.
This brings up an angle. I think the counter argument to this is that as a business, if it's hard to maintain and it costs a lot of money, they're not going to do it. They're only going to do it if it improves the user experience, sells more copies of the game. So maybe
I mean, I think it does. It's just
it absolutely
like,
does.
You know,
but
it just doesn't cost. There are ways that you can do it that doesn't cost you anything. Like sending someone a review copy doesn't cost you anything.
Well, I don't know about that for legal stuff, but in terms of like, what if you could talk to a developer right now? We can clearly sell them that it's useful to have a wiki, but like, what would the answer for them be? Just have like wiki as a service, like have someone who's able to maintain it for them and keep it updated?
I think the answer would be to have a clear, concise onboarding, which is not something that most fighting games have. Most of them are really bad about this. You need to like actually dedicate someone to do this. This is something that I learned.
Wait, are you talking about tutorials, just like having better UX?
Yeah,
like
just having resources. This is something I learned from David Serlin. I'm going to tell you right now. He said that in his experience working with fighting game companies, what always ends up happening is that they have kind of like individual people doing individual things. So somebody's working on this screen for the game's UI, and somebody's working on another screen, and they're all divided. They're all compartmentalized very tightly. Everyone has their little job. And this ends up with a situation where things don't make sense when they all get put together. They all get put together, and now something's inconsistent with another part of the game, or the UI is a mess in one area. It makes more sense in the other. So there needs to be this clear, concise effort at every level of the game to be more explanatory, if that makes sense. Like why does something work this way? Oh, because you got hit this particular way. Like how can you add maybe an indicator, or can you add I don't know. There's a million solutions. People have come up with a million different things. I think Fantasy Strike in particular, the way that they do onboarding is great. Because it's very similar to Guilty Gear Exard. But the problem with Exard is that the tutorial is like 20 minutes long. It's really like, it's just like running back and forth across the screen for like 20 minutes. And the every time it tries to explain you something, it opens like this dialogue box that scrolls text across the screen, and it just takes forever to read all of that. It sucks. So the way they change it is that they have kind of shorten it down. They make it much shorter, and they also make it so that the information just kind of appears as you're moving around on the screen. And they don't hold you in one place for very long, which is kind of like the thing that I don't like about Exard's tutorial.
That's a pretty good UI trick. Keep them engaged.
Yeah, you keep them engaged, you keep them playing the game. And it absolutely does not take more than like 5 minutes of your time. It's super great. But that to me is for the UX designers to figure out. Every time we have this discussion about like what fighting games can do, everyone has to play the UX designer. And we're not those people, you know. We just need to tell them that we would like a better effort to be made.
Yeah, UX is a whole other issue.
yeah, people go to school for this stuff, and as consumers, we can say honest in honest ways, because we try to appreciate our developers in the scene. We can say, hey, we'd really like it if there was a better way to explain all of these mechanics to the game, stuff like that. But the other, I haven't been able to talk about it yet, but the reason that I think wikis will never really go away, even if you were somehow able to convince a developer that having all this information is useful and they should pour a ton of resources. The problem that you will run into is emergent gameplay, right? What happens when you go to all this length to having a very nice explanation of how the game works, and then somebody finds out that the game works in a way that you did not intend to, right? Mm-hmm. What happens then? Well, somebody's going to write about it. Somebody's going to explain it. Maybe they won't. Save that shit for nationals, after all. Was a thing that happened. And what do you do about that if you maintain an official resource for the game? Example, Nintendo, let's say, has a really nice, well-written guide on playing Super Smash Bros. Mm-hmm. Oh, somebody came up with wave dashing. What then? Are they going to add it to the thing? Maybe not. Nintendo's stated stance on that is that they don't like stuff like that. They don't like those kinds of mechanics that are difficult to grapple. But, it's super important to know how to do these things. So somebody else is going to explain it. So you can't ever really divorce yourself from that problem if you're making video games. People are going to start coming up with all these things.
Yeah, if you're a developer, you have to embrace whatever your community is going to do with your game. That's one thing I think everyone agrees on.
Yeah, it's just that, that doesn't end up happening in a lot of situations.
Mm-hmm. And I can also think of L canceling as an example of a mechanic with just no indicator and being really obtuse to get. But it's also a reason people like Melee more than other games, for better or worse. Yeah,
right? What if the emergent gameplay that we come up with is more interesting? The game is more interesting as a result of knowing those things. I don't, if you want to give a more FGC, maybe core example, like FADC, right? Stuff like that. Or Korean backdash, stuff like that. The developers left that stuff in. Evidently, they looked at it and they said, yeah, it's fine. People are having fun with it. But that stuff was never explained anywhere in any of those games. Because, emergent gameplay, that's just the way it works.
You don't think there's anything special about that, though? The fact that they didn't explain it, that people figured it
out? I think in a competitive game, you have to give people all the tools. You have to tell everyone what they have, right? If they want to use something in an interesting way is something that you can have if you have all of the tools laid out as well, right? I think, there's plenty of games where like Skullgirls, where they tell you everything about how it works. Undizzy is explained, IPS is explained, resets are explained. They even have that nice little indicator of how you got hit after a reset, which is a nice way of explaining someone how a mix-up works. That is, to me, is a cool thing.
That is a cool feature,
but all that stuff being explained does not give you almost any edge in terms of actual gameplay in Skullgirls, because that game is extremely demanding to play competitively. So, and maybe that's not the case for every game. I'll go back to Fantasy Strike. Fantasy Strike is extremely simple toolkit, right? Playing it is also pretty easy, but that was their design vision. They wanted an easy game to get into, and you want to have perfect execution of your game plan. That's what they want. So that to me is cool. I think you can have it either way, really. You can explain everything, or you can have some things explained. It's just that don't make it hostile. You know what I mean? I think hostility is different from leaving stuff out. There's like the Guilty Gear Strive UI situation. That to me was just hostile.
You think
to the
that's
user.
hostile? Dang.
I, I think it was like extremely
It's an
hard to
attack.
read, and it people started talking about like accessibility concerns, like people with impaired vision would not be able to enjoy the game because the UI is really bad, and it's very hard to
True.
read from a distance and stuff like that, right?
Yeah, accessibility in general is a pretty hard topic to broach. Honestly, the reason you cited Skullgirls and Fantasy Strike is because they are, one, huge fans of the genre who grew up with them, and two, they're people who put their time into the UX and the experience of learning. So maybe they just put more concern into that than in other aspects of the game.
Oh yeah, the developers of those games absolutely learned from the failures of other games when they put all this stuff together, right? And that's fine. That's cool. What concerns me is regression specifically. Like, there's no reason for some of this stuff to be coming out the way it does after years and years of having this conversation. Same with like rollback netcode and all those other things, right?
That's another topic, yeah.
But just the point I want to make is, community resources will always exist outside of the game, and there's a million different approaches that you could have, as to why. You could say that the resources that the game provide are inadequate. Sometimes they are, sometimes they aren't. Or that the community has simply come up with new ways to play the game and the developer will not keep up with those things. Or they will, they will decide that it's not worth explaining. Like when I mentioned FADC, like maybe they didn't want to explain that stuff. FADC was super important, but maybe they wanted to leave that out, right? Whatever. Capcom had their reasons. So, it's an unavoidable problem. You're always going to have resources out there.
Yeah,
now the question is, how easy is it to find it, right?
So we can try to get actionable feedback out of this. So let's try to address the problem. What if I'm going to make a new guide, a new document? The best things I can do for it. One, try to back it up in a wiki. If you have it in a Google format, I guess put an archive.org copy. Like, are there any other services you should back it up on, you think?
I think you should do the following. If you're going to write something that you want other people to read, just as in general, and especially in fighting games, first of all, it should not be in a Google Doc or a Google Sheet, because it is extremely hard to find those things later on if you don't have the link. I know that Google Drive does have like a publish to the web thing where like anybody can read it, but every single time I've tried to find something with that, it never shows up. I've looked up like documents by name, knowing that you can technically find them, and they just don't show up. So that to me is terrible. Don't do that. If you want to write on Google Docs, obviously you can, but your priority should be to export it and to host it where other people can find it just by looking it up, right? So there's a lot of ways you could do that. You could put it on a website. You could find somebody else to put it on a website for you, like a wiki. There's plenty of examples of that, right? You could put it on. Back in the day, there was GameFAQs, right? GameFAQs is still there. You can still upload guides. I think a month ago, somebody, their name is Afro Shoji. That's what they go by online. Uploaded this super detailed, like everything you could ever want to know, guide about Waku Waku 7, this Neo Geo fighting game. Everything you ever want to know: frame data, system mechanics, game data values, everything. It's a sight to behold, that thing.
Well, why
and
was
it's on
it?
GameFAQs.
Yeah, did he choose to upload the GameFAQs for certain
Yeah,
reason?
the guy's been doing stuff on GameFAQs for a long time.
Okay, so he's dedicated to that forum
used
community, but he's not. Was he part of the FGC independently?
Oh yeah, he's in the Discord. I didn't know this. Later, I was kind of just talking. He started talking. He's in the Discord. He likes the game. He likes fighting games. So that's just what he does. So, but that's fine, because if I look up Waku Waku 7 guide on Google.com, I'm gonna find his result because it's on a website that other people can read, and it's written in a way that hits all the keywords so that you can find it if you look it up. Google Docs does not give you this. Discord does not give you this.
Yep, Facebook doesn't. Twitter is minimal.
Facebook doesn't give you it either.
People try to use hashtags, but Twitter is just too temporary.
Yeah, Twitter, kind of. I've seen that some tweets do get indexed by Google, but not all of them. So just it's easier to say that it doesn't work.
And people can delete them. It's all the same issues. Yeah.
Yep. And people can delete them, or their account gets
Or
banned, or whatever. It's really bad. So your priority when you write a guide should be, make sure that other people can find it on google.com in the search bar. And the second priority should be make sure that other people can make a copy of your guide.
Yeah, that's a good
Now,
one.
this one's a little difficult because I will give you real example. The other day, this was 2 months ago, I want to say, somebody was complaining about how a certain character, it was like their page on Mizumi was plagiarizing. Like it was based on a document that somebody else wrote, and it was like word for word copies. And so I'm like, oh, okay, here we go. So first, my reaction to that was like, why are we having this discussion? But anyway, I wanted to make sure that it was right. So I went in and I looked at the document and I said, yeah, that is definitely that. That's from that. Okay. But like, I don't understand why that mentality exists. Why was that a problem we had to have? How bad? Why is it so bad that somebody goes in and puts some of the information from that guide somewhere else? And I get it. It's like you don't want people copying your stuff. I respect that, but you should probably.
We have to think about it in terms of intellectual property, because when you read about archive.org and like archiving music or Metallica, all the time you have people coming to take down stuff. So their stance is basically we save it until someone has an issue, and then okay, we'll take it down because they ask us.
Yeah, so it's like they're allowed to have that opinion, and I respect it because it is a useful guide. But my approach, in the rare capacity as somebody who has to run several wikis, is that if it's on the page, make a copy of it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't want myself to be the only person who has a copy of this on the internet, because what happens if I lose it or I can't give anyone else the copy because I disappear tomorrow, whatever. Like, what I don't want is for my documents to just become lost because I'm the only one who was keeping them. You know what I mean? So, my advice to anyone who wants to write a guide is make sure other people can find it easily. And also, I encourage you to have a friendly stance about making copies of it. If you want somebody to at least ask, I respect that. In the case of the Waku Waku 7 thing, that guy had a disclaimer on the front to say, if you want to use this information, ask. That's all I ask. But we talked to the guy, and now a lot of that information has been reused with permission to build they're revamping the Waku Waku 7 pages on the Shoryuken wiki. They were extremely bad before. So now we have this really well done set of wiki pages. And all that we had to do was ask, and the guy has a super great mentality about it. So I would just like to see more stuff like that out of people. That's just me.
Yeah, I think you have to train people to think about the internet in this way, because we're way too used to using it day to day. People don't think of it as just like scraps of paper. The whole internet is held together with like chewing gum and twine and scotch tape. Like, people have to be more aware of that.
Yeah, and that's why I have like this tweet. That's why I made this tweet, because you do have to bang the drum and you have to make noise and annoy the shit out of people sometimes for this stuff to matter.
Another use case which would be useful is like, if I'm a viewer and let's say someone posts a great thing in a Discord, how can I then take that, save it, and back it up for other people? And I guess the only solution I can say is go to archive.org and upload it there. Like, I don't know what else.
Yeah, I mean, with Discord, the thing is that Discord is not designed for any of these things that people think they can use it for.
Yeah.
Like, okay, I'll give you a more real world example. The training stage of history Discord, which is a Soul Calibur kind of like new player Discord, they literally, I don't know why they did this, they have channels with entire explanations of game mechanics that are just channels. They're just
stuff.
like,
yeah, I don't understand this mentality, but I think it's just the generation. Like, it's easier to engage with stuff if you're in the app all the time.
It's whatever, right? But like the only thing you can do about that is that somebody, because Discord is not made with the intention of like being this sort of resource, and I don't think. I mean, I would love if Discord maybe had some solution where like you can turn like a Discord channel into like a web page or something. Maybe that would be cool, but cool. I don't know. That seems completely outside of their scope. So, now the only thing anyone can do about it is, first you have to know about it. First you have to know that's there. I didn't know that was there. And second, you can just go in and copy and paste all the messages and put them somewhere and then like put it on an Internet Archive or something. But like that assumes you have permission. Somebody could just take down request that if they wanted to.
Yeah, it's a lot of steps to actually have to copy paste stuff.
It's
and
a
go
lot
put
of
it on
exactly.
archive.org.
It's a lot of different ways, and I mean, that stuff is just nobody wants to do that, and it makes everyone's jobs harder because you can't really automate the process I just described. I've thought about it.
I think I'm actually curious because I know they archive.org is constantly combing through Twitter and other websites and constantly backing stuff up. I think they said every video that gets linked on social media on YouTube, they have some backup copy. I feel like we could do something like this in the future.
Here's what I think you can do, and I'm saying this on the disclaimer that you could do it. You might get your account banned, but you could do it. You could use a bot to scrape every message in a server, grab all the links that match, kind of like a Google Drive, and you could grab them, and you could there's like you can just do it through curl. I think like you can just do it from like a command line. You can make a request for Internet Archive to do that. Now I'm not going to get into the myriad of consequences that could have, but I mean that's kind of like the only thing anyone would do aside from do it by hand. So I don't think anyone really wants to take on the responsibility of having to manage the storm of people not wanting their stuff copied on the internet that would ensue from that.
Yeah, this is something all of the internet is going to have to grow up and learn, just because all of IP law, everything about how we share information is just not fully advanced to where it has to be at with where technology is.
It's absolutely not prepared for this problem that we're having, right? And this problem, there've been a couple interpretations of like when this is going to start happening. People have said, oh, it's not going to happen until 2023, or it won't happen until 3 months after June, or I've seen a lot of different ways. Google, it pays their people a very handsome sum to make sure that the wording is vague and it allows them to do whatever they want.
Well, the wording's a courtesy. All businesses if they want to shut it down tomorrow, they can.
Exactly. There's that angle too, but like, people come at you with any sort of thing on twitter.com. So like it's just we're not ready to deal with this. And I've tried to bring the conversation around to fighting games because what I want is for the culture to be in place so that when the next generation of fighting games comes out, and we're starting to see it with like Guilty Gear Strive, we don't have this problem, for all of those games as well, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think, like I said, this is just an internet problem. I think we're just gonna have to deal with users and the throwaway internet culture.
At a more general level, maybe the reason I'm just talking about it in fighting games because I would give myself a headache thinking about how much is genuinely going to be lost by this.
I think
there's so much.
We have to train people to be more like us, I guess, and just that when you see something of note and you don't see a copy of it, you probably just want to put it somewhere in case it gets lost. If you have a collective conscience of people doing that, it's as a backup, I don't know. That's kind of the best you can do right now.
Yeah, I mean, the scale of this problem is so huge that, at least in my position, I'm just talking about fighting games because this has been a problem that has come to a head in fighting games where we're starting to see stuff get lost and we're starting to see a lot of problems associated to these Discords and Google Docs and all this whole setup that we have is just terrible. But yeah, I mean, and I've also seen problems that are associated with this that are not necessarily addressed as an information problem. Like, again, James Chen asked, like, why are there so few people joining Discords to play fighting games? It's because they don't know. It's because this whole way that we're doing things is just, shutting us off from the rest of the world, and it makes us hard to interact with, and all this sort of thing. But that's never the conversation people have. People are always like, oh, it's because this game sucks, or it's because the net play is bad.
Yeah,
and maybe
there's so many reasons. It's kind of hard to do that without doing it case by case.
Yeah, exactly. And maybe those things are, relevant points. I don't know, but that angle is almost never brought up. And so I really strive to have this conversation brought up everywhere I can I don't get the best success with it, to be honest with you.
Yeah, most people are not interested in it.
I've sent comments and emails asking, hey, can we can we collaborate on maybe talking about this subject, or do you guys want to talk about this on your show? I don't get anything. And
one thing
it does.
also. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say it does lead to information. It does lead to situations where there's misinformation, like just straight up, because people don't talk about something. They will say that X website is shut down or that X website is bad because nobody talked about either that website is still alive or that service became a lot better. Yeah. There's just nobody talks about it, so nobody finds out, and so we end up with weird stuff like that.
Yeah, I didn't even think of that. I was going to say another type of information we didn't even touch on is bracket data and just tournament archives. So another choice we have to make going into the whole format war between Smash GG, Challenge, Battlefy, all those are services. They could all go away. We have to be sure those are also getting backed up in some form. Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I think what you would have to do to solve this is that you would have to, and this is, I mean, this is a Herculean thing that I'm about to describe. You would have to come up with a file format that would be able to preserve a bracket.
I'm thinking this is doable because
doable.
I worked for a project called Not GarPR, and what we did was pull in Smash GG, Challenge, and TO files, and we were able to get all that data to match up and then to make ELO rankings off of it. So I think as long as there's APIs to pull this information, we could then cobble something together. Only if they're open to it, though. At least Smash GG has an API now. They didn't used to.
That's the part that I'm worried about, right? So, like, I think you could very easily come up with a normalized format for bracket
open source format. That'd be cool.
Exactly. And then what you have to do is you have to convince all these companies that the format is worth investing in, so that they can provide through their own pipelines the ability to export that as your format of choice. Right?
That's honestly. I would really like to see a future where we have an open source sort of software to keep track of this stuff, and then to get all the companies to sign onto it. But it's in their interest to make it sticky, to have to stay on Smash GG to interact with their data, and same with Challenge.
It is in their direct interest to make this stuff require kind of like dedicated attention to their platform.
Yeah, because otherwise people grab it and they just leave, or build a better visualization or better dashboard.
I mean, I think if anyone would do it, Challenge would do it, because they've been working with community people in the past. Like recently, they announced like a Discord bot that it's not even written by them. They just partnered with somebody about that.
One thing they did that was really nice, when they were changing subdomains to make it a paid feature only, they did leave in all the existing ones for free. So I know some of mine still have a subdomain, even though we don't pay, because we were using those to scrape data and do stuff with them, and they understood that. So if you talk to these companies and make it,
the domain thing is so it's such a that is a whole thing, right? Because the domain thing has affected me, because
you lost data when Challenge switched?
I haven't lost data, but here's the thing: when Mizumi was around before me, it was on Mizumi.net, and when it was offered to me to begin hosting that, because the guy who hosted it just didn't want to do it anymore. I asked, what are you planning on doing with Mizumi.net? And they said, oh, I still have stuff I'm doing with that. So I said, okay, no problem, whatever. Can you provide us with a redirect? So if somebody types in wiki.mizumi.net, it'll go to us. And he said, yeah. And that was fine. That worked great for like a year. That service is no longer there. That person stopped doing that.
Yep.
So now people think.
Now you need SEO.
And I've seen it. Yeah, thankfully Mizumi Wiki is still the first, if you look it up, it goes to us. So we're good. And you look up Melty Blood Wiki and all the great stuff that we have there, it still goes to us. So, effectively that problem is taken care of. But now there are people who have said that the site is dead because they didn't know.
Yeah.
Sometimes people just step away from this stuff because they lose interest, and then they come back and they just type in Mizumi.net, and now they won't find it,
Yeah, if they don't have a Twitter,
thankfully they'll probably go to Google and type in Mizumi and they'll get us, right? Because we're still the first search result. So I don't think that's too much big of a problem. But yeah, I mean, subdomains are a pain in the ass. We had the same problem with Shoryuken Wiki, where like, I'm gonna try not to get into this too much because it's like still kind of an ongoing thing. When Evo bought out, or when Sony bought out Evo or whatever, Shoryuken got put into maintenance. Now, not the wiki. I'm not associated with that.
Mm-hmm.
But the rest of the site is basically in read-only mode, and they took down the original server for the wiki because I had moved it to my server, and I told them, "Hey, can you guys redirect it to my server and just point the domain?" That ended up never happening, and so now the original wiki.shoryuken.com domain no longer points to us. So again, you just gotta know.
Yeah.
So now there's like dead links everywhere.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I really want that to be resolved. I really hope we can resolve it sooner than later because this has been going on for 2 months now, and I've seen a lot of stuff which is linking to SRK's pages that are just not going to where they need to be, even though that content is still available.
So
that is so terrible.
I don't think there's anything you can do about. I think it's called link rot. Even just people can change things so easily because an address is just this is where you can find something. So I think to that end, again, you have to just train people to make copies or like don't use link shorteners. Make sure things are clear and like able to be found. It's all in the same area.
Yeah. I mean, you can't fully solve that problem, but you know,
and they're a private entity too, so there's probably reasons they don't want to do it for you.
Yeah, I mean that the SRK thing, I would love to talk about it at a later date when things actually get worked out, because as far as I know, that is still ongoing, and a lot of the stuff that I work on is gonna have to kind of like move around that. But I mean, we do need to support all the new stuff that's popped up lately, because like I'm sure there's this whole conversation for people watching. They're thinking about it with, you know, gloom, and it sounds like it sucks. But I want to do this like next month. I want to compile everything that has been written on these wikis in the past year. Some of the progress that we've made on this is astonishing when you put it in like a bigger perspective. There's been a lot of really great improvements to resources in terms of like, and not even necessarily wikis, just like stuff you can find on the internet for certain games, right? For certain topics. Like there's been a ton of really good stuff written and put out in a way that is good for preservation. That's great. But
we just need more of it.
Yeah, we need more of it, right? So for us to do that, we need to support those existing efforts, right? So like Dustloop is still there, and they're doing a great job. The Strive wiki, they're going to be doing a lot of stuff that they learned over the past, you know, couple of years. And I've been helping them just kind of get the technical stuff set up for it. So it's going to look really great. And there's going to be a lot of really useful tools that we can make because of that. But in terms of new things, Dream Cancel, which is like an SNK focused fan site, they have a wiki. They've had it for a little while now. I believe they established it in the middle of last year. I could be wrong about that. But the improvements that they've made to that site, the amount of SNK related content that they've been able to write there has significantly improved in the past few months. And that is now creating kind of like an expectation for all of these, you know, circles of SNK fans where it's like they want to have this stuff up to date and they care about this stuff, and there starts to become an investment in having this stuff up to date and easy to read. Because the other aspect of this is when we're talking about a game that came out in like the 90s or the early 2000s, they are effectively erased from the internet in terms of official sources.
Mm-hmm.
Companies, you know, and this happens even with games that are new, like came out in the 2010s. Like they remove the website, right? Because they don't want to have it there anymore. They take down the servers. They stop promoting it because it's no longer a relevant product. And so the only reason you're going to find out about it is because of like a YouTube video talking about it, or somebody mentioned it to you because they played it a long time ago, or you'll find it on an emulation site or stuff like that. So when people have these like attachments towards these games and they don't want to just let them fall into obscurity, and they want more people to try them and to play them and to have fun with them, which is a cool thing that in fighting games we can have because most genres don't have this.
Mm-hmm. We have a history. Starting in arcades is much earlier than most games.
Exactly. And the nice part about that is that you can still have, you know, the ability to play Street Fighter 2 or whatever with another person. You can even play them across the world with netplay. That is not something that we can say about every genre. You know, there are so many genres like MOBAs where the earliest examples of MOBAs are dead. Never ever is anyone gonna have that stuff again. I'm thinking of Dawngate when I say that. That wasn't. I
I don't
believe that
even
was
know
made
that
by
one.
EA. It's just gone. You can't, because the way that game was made, nobody's gonna be able to put that service back online, and so it's gone, right? And so fighting games have this nice aspect of that I would like to preserve and keep going. So
And we can say like that aspect is the community. The fact that it's multiplayer, the fact that people have to think and talk and like interact with each other. That's probably what kept it around for this long with as much dedication as it has.
yeah,
It, yeah.
and the multiplayer aspect has led people to write about resources for games that just don't get any sort of advertising or any sort of support from their original developers. Maybe their original developers don't even exist anymore, right? Stuff like that. So when one of the aspects that I think creates kind of like an investment for the people writing these resources, kind of like a personal investment, is that if you look up like Waku Waku 7, I'll go back to that.
Mhm.
If you look up anything about that game, it's not going to come from Sunsoft because they don't exist no more, as far as I know. I think they don't. I don't think they're in business anymore, and I don't think anyone sells that game aside from like the Neo Geo releases that Hamster Co does for consoles. So if you want to find out anything about that game, you're gonna find out through a fan resource. You're gonna find out through a wiki. You're gonna find out through a video, whatever. And so that becomes kind of like a personal thing for some of these people. There are tons of people who really love these games, and they do these things with the intention of bringing in more people, making it easier to learn, easier to approach, right? And also just to say that they exist, because part of it is that, you know, if there wasn't a wiki for some of these games, I don't think anyone would know they existed
Yeah.
realistically, or they would be so much more obscure than they are, especially with like Kenju, which is like this Atomis Wave arcade game that, you know, I mentioned the example of games that never came out. That game never came out. It was complete. It just never came out. So when somebody pulled the ROM, now the only way you're gonna find out about it is because of fan sites that explain what the game is about. Because people went in and tried to figure out what is this? What is this game? And it turns out people really like that game. Some people really enjoy it. So now there's a little community around a game that literally never came out, and the only way you're ever gonna find out about it is through the people who write these resources. So that's a whole different aspect to this preservation thing, right? Like bringing this stuff back to relevance.
Yeah, that's the activist mentality that you can like restart a community or reinvigorate interest in something by bringing the, or I guess properly archiving, properly presenting the information. I agree with all
Yeah,
that. Yeah.
yeah, and there's nowadays we talk about how like there's a Discord when okay, when you say the, I don't know, example like the Marvel versus Capcom 3 Discord. Okay, I'm talking. You know, we're talking. There is one called the UMVC3 Discord. It exists, but think about that for a minute. You're giving it the qualifier of the Discord, singular. It's the place to play, and I've always disagreed with that because you don't need to interact with any of these people to really play the game, and that goes for almost everything, right? So, um, when we create these ecosystems, I think in a way we leave people out because we start to assume that that's the only place that it exists or the only community that exists. And when it's around discords and stuff like that, if people genuinely stop playing games because they don't like the community attached to it. And
Yeah,
so
that's a very
when
interesting
there's
modern. I've just started noticing that too, where people relate the Discord to the game itself. Like you can't just say it's
exactly
a fun game. You have to say, "Oh, it was fun, but now these people have ruined it." That just seems very
exactly
weird to me.
because there is this qualifier in the language that we give where it's like it's the Discord, right? It's the Discord, and we're
And it's
not
official in
calling
most
it the
cases.
official Discord, but the way it sounds, the language that you're giving, gives it this sort of like authority, right?
Well,
Like that
yeah,
is
we're
the
talking about fighting
community.
games, but I think in terms of real games too, people say like, "Oh, the Discord for X modern game is bad. Those developers are bad. They don't moderate it. They don't, the people in
Yeah,
there."
yeah. I think a lot of games. I mean, I can't really speak to that because this is something that I only interact with on
On a fighting game basis.
on the fighting game
I don't want
basis
to
because
name
like
any
I
individual fighting
know.
game discords though that have bad reputations.
Yeah, no, I'm not going to. But
Okay.
what I'm gonna say, what I was gonna say is like I know that that exists for like racing games in particular because I have a
Hmm.
friend who plays a lot of different racing games, so they tell me the horror stories about stuff like that. So I'm sure it exists, but like at least for me, outside of fighting games, when I want to play a game, I'll just play the game,
Yeah.
and you know it's nice to be able to think that you can interact with the game without having to interact with its community at all. But because of all the conversation we just had about the kind of like the fan resource important aspect, it becomes difficult to do that for quite a few titles and quite a few communities. But
Yeah.
thankfully, if you have a nice, well-written resource like a Dustloop or a Mizumi in most some examples, then you don't have to do any of those things. You can learn how to play the game. You can learn stuff that you can apply against other players without necessarily having to talk to these randoms on the internet that you don't have mental energy for. It really is a huge amount of involvement just to play a video game.
Yeah.
It's not something that we talk about all
I
the
guess
time.
yeah, in the ideal case, you could get good at a fighting game without having to speak to another person, just by like playing anonymously. I don't know. Maybe that's an ideal to strive
Yeah,
for.
I mean, you could. I mean, you could in some games. Like in Fantasy Strike, I got to like platinum, and I don't talk to the Discord for that game because like I just played it a lot, and if I needed to know something, I went to their wiki and I learned it.
Yep, there you go.
So you can, but Fantasy Strike is kind of an extreme example because you can learn almost everything you need to know. It's just the execution and the mind games involved in that become kind of the harder, unexplainable parts of it. But
That's experience,
uh,
yeah.
yeah, that's the experience part, right? Uh,
I'm just
I
I'm
guess
looking at the time real quick. I'm gonna have to go in like 5 to 10 minutes, so I wanted to make sure
sure.
there's no other big topics we missed.
Did we miss anything? We thought we kind of just went on and on.
No, that was good. I think we covered most of everything, but I guess to leave off again with like, I guess what is the most important work you want to plug for what you're doing with the wiki? Like, can people donate? Do they volunteer? Like, how do you keep this
I
community
mean,
going?
so thankfully a lot of people donated towards our domain renewal costs because that shit is expensive.
Hmm.
So I had asked for people to donate and they did, and we were able to set aside, and I thank everyone for that. So I'm not going to ask for any more of that. I'm going to say if you want to help, then you should read a wiki and maybe make a small edit. Any edit, big or small, is fine. And just kind of help make the pages better. So if you're not aware already, you can go to wiki.gbl.gg for Mizumi, which is a lot of obscure fighting games. Or you can go to srk.shib.live, which is where I have Shoryuken currently. So if you like Street Fighter, Soul Calibur, we really need Soul Calibur editors. So if you guys are into Soul Calibur, anyone listening, just consider helping us out. Um, yeah, just consider, if you have a character guide that you have on Google Docs or something, you know, don't even worry about it. If you go to one of the discords for one of these wikis and give us permission to use it, we'll take care of it. I just say, hey, I wrote this guide. You guys can use it on the wiki. It's all yours, right? Like if you give us permission to use it, that is huge contribution.
I
So
think that's actually a
stuff like
great
that.
initiative. Like, I wonder if you tweet me all your guides, and you just had people send you everything.
Here's what I'm gonna do. I was gonna do it before the show so I could talk about it, but I'm not going to. I'll do it in a little bit. I'm going to create a form for sending me stuff,
There you go.
right?
That's
Kind of like a
perfect.
mailbox, like a PO box. Like just send me stuff. Like if you send me this file, I'm gonna put it on a catalog, and if it's on that catalog, you have to agree to it before you send it. And I'll have a way to process takedown requests and says somebody sends something that's not theirs, and we'll work that out. But what I want to do is open a PO box where you can send me something and say, "Hey, can you take care of this document for me?" And if you do that, then you give me the permission to put it on a wiki. So that way, we start moving some of that information away, and also we start indexing some.
Yep.
So
That
that's
sounds.
something
It's
that I'm going to be
exactly what
working on.
archive.org is doing. I think it's a good idea.
Yeah, and one of the ways that we're going to do it is that I'm going to take the copy of the file. I'm going to make a copy probably on a Google Drive somewhere if it's Google Doc so that it can still be useful because Google Sheets, like,
And people
they're
still
meant
use
to be
it.
used
Yeah.
within the app, right? But then also export it and send it to Internet Archive so that we have another copy there. So That sort of thing doesn't take me very much time.
I wonder if we could get like a fighting game community collection going on there. Maybe I'll talk to Jason Scott next time and ask. He does a lot of very niche game stuff
Maybe.
there.
There are a couple collections that exist. Like I know of a collection for every character in Blaze Blue Central Fiction, where somebody just went through like every character guide they could find and has like there's like a Google sheet for like every character. Stuff like that exists. But yeah, for everything, it's probably going to be very mishmash. Like some stuff's going to be missing. There's probably going to be complete collections of other things. But I mean, what I would like to have is like a place where people can grab resources and move them to better formats because after somebody writes a guide they're probably not gonna put all that back on another page. Some cases that has happened, but yeah, it's something to explore.
Yeah, you've inspired me to go find the 1 or 2 guides I wrote on Smashboards, and I'll go back them up somewhere just in case. All right. That was a good
I hear
conversation,
Smashboards
though.
is still going okay, so I don't know. Hopefully they're doing all right. I don't know anything about
Smashboards is an
that.
interesting case because we did a lot of effort for archiving and preservation. We had the rankings, we were backing up data, we were pulling it in. I think it's just the user base has dropped off. So there's people maintaining
Yeah.
it, paying for it. There is some interest, and I guess they have a Discord and some people post still, but they have a lot of guides in history there that I hope get preserved elsewhere just in case.
Yeah, that's a whole conversation because the same happened for Tekken Zaibatsu. That site is just gone. Um, I have some of the files, but not all of it. So I'm gonna try to get that done. I'm very sorry to the many Tekken people who I've kept pending on the Tekken Zaibatsu backup because I have it. I promise you. It's just that I don't have time. So I'm gonna put it up there soon, so we can keep it.
All right. I think, yeah. Thanks for all your work,
We're
Shib.
done.
I'm going to plug your
Yeah.
Twitter here, Shibarizu on Twitter. I don't know
Yes,
who's
sir.
watching still. We got 10 followers, maybe 10 viewers.
Appreciate everybody who watched. I saw a couple people I'm familiar with. Appreciate you guys.
Yep. It's nice to talk about this stuff with someone who cares. I hope other people start caring about it, or at least start realizing that, oh, that YouTube video I liked, it's gone now. I should start preserving
It's
some stuff
gone
in my
now. That
life.
sucks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Once it starts to hurt you, you'll start seeing more instances of it, and fighting games is just one area of life where we're losing stuff. So it's always good to talk about this, in my opinion.
For sure. For sure.
All right.
For sure. Appreciate the conversation.
Yep. Have a good night.
Have a good night, everybody.
Yeah, play some fighting games sometime.
Have some fun. Goodbye.
Yeah. See ya. All right. Good night, everyone. Talk to you later.